Howdy, howdy, howdy. Hey, welcome to my channel. I'm Daav. I'm an artist, theologian, philosopher, thinker, reader, writer, creative, all around creative, I guess. So I've had some people interested in asking me a little bit about kind of my background, my history, my faith, my own spiritual journey. So I wanted to do some videos specifically on that. So I've kind of come up with a 4-part video. This first one is just going to be an intro and kind of just my mindset, my thinking, my background a little bit, and then launch into kind of 3 videos on kind of drilling down a little bit into my own journey, my own understanding, my own walk, my own faith journey, the way in which I perceive things and the way in which I operate and work through the world. And so I kind of wrote some notes down here, and this first one is just going to be a brief introduction, and then I'm going to go into the evolution of religious ideas and my faith, and then dealing specifically with kind of how religious ideas change over time, and how we are in a certain particular time, historical setting, cultural framework, geopolitical, economic, socio-economic kind of understanding of who I am and who we are as a people, and how our faith is embedded in that, and our religion is embedded in that, and how our ideas the religious ideas have changed over time, and specifically looking at 2 religious ideas, Satan and the afterlife. And then the video after that is going to be about the evolution of religious ideas and my understanding of both the Bible and church history and church. And so my background is I have an undergraduate degree in philosophy and religion and a master's degree in theology, but I am an artist by inspiration, an artist by craft, an artist by my daily choices to be creative. But my education is in theology, and as I studied theology, I saw there was these changing patterns through time, and how everything was interwoven and interlocked, and how where we stand today and what we believe today is different than times past. Even 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, 5,000 years ago. Of course, things are very different today, right? And a lot of times we're so caught up in the day-to-day that we don't see the bigger picture. We don't see it all, right? We don't have an understanding of the whole history that's led up to this moment, to this very day. And that deals with art, that deals with politics, that deals with education, that deals with technology and politics. It deals with everything, right? And as you grab a thread and start to trace it back through the fabric of history, you see it's interwoven with all these other threads, and you got to jump onto this other thread to understand that, and another thread to understand that. And so it can become very daunting, right? And historians just love, and maybe I'm a bit of a historian as well, and philosophers love, and historians love, and to just search that out and to follow that through and see how it all is interconnected and plays out, right? And and that comes down to this first introduction video about myself. And I tend to see things in a systematic perspective, right? And so there are these systems of thought, and it starts when we're young, I think. And I think as humans, we like to categorize, we like to organize, we like to put things in their spot. How that helps us to make sense of the world around us. So like when we're little, and we go to school, and school world is different than home world. School world has kind of a different set of rules and expectations, and those are set out by our teachers and hall monitors and principals and whatever. And as you first start school, kindergarten, first grade, second grade, you kind of struggle with those a little bit, but you come to understand them. And usually within the first couple of weeks, of the new school year, you begin to understand what the expectations are. You know when it's reading time and math time, and when it's time to go to the carpet for group activities, when it's time to sit at your desk, and your teacher just kind of, has some signal, and then it's okay, time to move on to the next thing, and, and it makes sense to you. That world starts to make sense. You systematize that whole thought process. It all starts to flow together, and it makes sense that this is your world at school, and this is how you operate, and this is what you do, and this is how you make sense out of the things that happen there, right? And when something intrudes upon that world, like when your parents come to visit, you get really excited because you want to show them your world. You want to show them your understanding of how things work, and you want them to sit in your seat and see your perspective and understand your world, But when you see your teacher, like somewhere else, like in a grocery store, then all of a sudden you're like blown away. Like, this person exists apart from this other world. Like, they can be involved in other things, and it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense, It's just really weird. And so it's just kind of really weird that this person can exist outside of that world, right? And as we grow on, our worlds begin to expand. So in this system of thought, the way in which we process the world, the way in which we understand the world, kind of plays into that whole thing. And as we move away from school, you get into middle school, and all of a sudden you've got a lot of other dynamics at play. You get emotions involved, you get boyfriends and girlfriends involved, and you get relational stuff and relationships, and you get, and you get into high school, all of a sudden you're working, and your worlds start to intermesh. Maybe you're playing sports, and so you've got school world and sports world, and they overlap a little bit, or band, or some other extracurricular activity that kind of overlaps. You're there with school friends doing school stuff. At the same time, you're leaving school to do other stuff, and you're associating with other people from other schools, and there's kind of some similarity, some familiarity, but at the same time it's different, and there's a different set of rules and different way in which to understand how the world works. It's just a different system of thought that's at play. And as we begin to understand how these systems of thoughts work in our own life, how we process the world around us, we can kind of step back and see it as an enclosed system, and then you get kind of into out of school and stuff, and you get out into the world, and you've picked up these things along the way, right? These ideas along the way. And some of them may be true, and some of them may not be true. And the more you experience the world, through work, and you start to meet other people through work, you have all these ideas that over time you've kind of categorized people, right? Into different classes, or different people that you think are cool, or people you don't want to hang out with, or people that are, suspicious looking or something. And then you kind of get into the work world, and you see these people that, these are the people you understand because they look like you, they kind of act like you, they're very similar to you, similar background and stuff. And so you kind of gravitate towards them, right? And then there's other people that are very different than you, and you don't quite fit in with them, and they don't quite fit in with you. And so they're kind of a little bit different, right? But you're intrigued by them. And so you kind of, at work, you're kind of working side by side with them. And so you get to know them, and you realize that in reality, they're not that different than you. And, they have some similarities as you, and some likes and dislikes just like you have. Maybe music, maybe foods, maybe going to the same dance clubs, or, there's something that connects you with them. And you realize that they're not that different. And people who travel the world and have these big experiences all over the world, after a while you start to realize that people are similar everywhere. There's those people in any situation you go into, in any part of the world you go in, and there's those people that are just hardworking, dedicated people, and that's just kind of what they do. And there's other people who just love to talk about sports, and maybe that's not your thing, and so you don't really hang out with them too much, but you find them everywhere that you go. There's other people who just love to talk about politics, and that's what they do, and they just want to be involved in the political scene and talk politics and talk history, or and maybe that's not your thing, and so you kind of stay away from them, but they're there everywhere. Any society you go into, people have very similar patterns to what we have here, within a certain range, right? obviously some places where people are going to be much more concerned about just making ends meet than they are maybe in the West, where we've got a little bit more affluency and we have more time to sit around and talk and go to coffee shops and hang out or whatever. But we start to understand that people are very similar everywhere, and people have certain tendencies everywhere, and people, like certain things, and they're consistent across, all people groups. We share the human experience to a certain extent, right? So I'm thinking about all this stuff, right? And this is kind of my thought process. So this is my introduction to my own journey. And I'm thinking about all these ways in which we process the world, in which we systematize the world, and how we categorize things, right? And we like things to be understood and kind of encapsulate them, right? We like our politics that way. We like to understand how things work politically. We like our society to work that way. We like to know what our expectations are, and we like to know kind of how things work, I took this trip, and I was in Kazakhstan, and we're hanging out in Kazakhstan, right? And we're hanging out with these guys, and one guy, he's got this car, and he's like, hey, you want to drive? And I'm like, I didn't want to drive. I'm like, I've got no idea what the driving rules are in Kazakhstan. I don't even know, I can watch the traffic patterns and I can figure it out and stuff, but I don't want to put myself in that situation, right? And I didn't want to get in trouble, and I didn't want to ruin his car in this foreign country. But the guy I was with, this other American guy, he's like, yeah, I'll drive, jumps in and just starts speeding around town, right? And I'm just like, what? And so I just was all these questions about stuff, and he was more outgoing and more ambitious and just jumped in and just did it, right? And that's cool. I'm glad he did. I'm glad he had that experience, and I was there with him, got to have it too. But it's just one of those things where I didn't understand the system of thought that went into driving in that country, right? And so that kind of stalled me out a little bit. We like to have those systems of thought. And the guy I was with, he caught on quicker. He could just go with the flow of traffic and just see how things were going and just kind of catch up as he goes along, right? So we all kind of exist a little bit different, but we like to categorize things. We like to put things into their place in life, right? So as far as system of thoughts are the same way. And there's a whole study out there. There's a whole department, colleges that study systems of thought, philosophically, religiously, economically. They study how people think and how systems of thought are developed over time. So this isn't like a new revolutionary field or anything. It's just when I start to apply it to my own life, things start to change. And I start to realize that, I grew up in a conservative fundamentalist Christian church in Northern California, right? So there's all these layers there, and all these systems of thought play into that. What it means to be a Californian, and in Northern California compared to Southern California. What it means to be a Christian. What it means to be a conservative fundamentalist Christian, and the things we did and didn't do, and the way in which we saw the world, and the things we were told were bad about the world, and the things which we were told were good about the world, and the way in which we understood the Bible, and the way it was used in our own lives. And so all of those systems of thought, they're put on you from a very young age, and you're brought up with it. But at some point, there's three things that happen, basically. You begin to question those systems of thought. You begin to question what you are raised with. And either you take them on as your own, and you accept them, and you don't have to ask any more questions, right? I had a college roommate that was just, I love to talk philosophy, and he was like, I don't want any part of it. He didn't like to be challenged. He just accepted this as what it was, and that was enough. And I was like, I need more. I need to know more beyond this, So he just accepted it. So that's one thing that can happen. You're raised with it, and you just accept it. You bring it on as your own. You're raised with it, and you fight your way through it. You challenge it, and you ask questions about it, and you own it. It becomes yours. It's not just something that's just accepted as, this is what I was told. This is something that you have discovered yourself, right? And the third thing that happens is you're raised with it, you ask the questions about it, you can't get the answers you need, and so you leave it. So I'm somewhere between that second and third one. Okay, that's kind of where I exist in my own spiritual life. I have questioned a lot about the systems of thought that have been put upon me from a very young age, and that started when I was in college and studying the Bible and studying Christian history and philosophy, and realizing that there was a lot more to all of that whole thing than I'd ever known or was ever taught. And all of that still couldn't answer my questions. And so I explored and explored and explored. And that's how I went on to get my master's degree, and I got certificate in spiritual formation and all kinds of stuff to help me try to understand these systems of thought within Christianity, within the Christian. I have even explored other religions. Yeah, I've even taught a class on world religions at community college. And so, I've done my due diligence in exploring these questions, and I continue to explore them because for me, it's the exploration of the question that is just as important because that's the journey. The exploration is the journey, right? So the exploration is just as important as any answer I may or may not come up with. Some stuff I may maybe come to a understanding that I appreciate and understand well enough that I can set it aside for a time and say, I'm comfortable with that. I may come back to it later and rethink it, but right now I'm comfortable with that. And that's part of the journey. That's part of the spiritual awakening, spiritual experience is being able to ask the questions and then go on the journey to find the answer. It's like the hero's journey, right? To find the answers to the questions that have been put before them. And this all comes from these systems, and that's the way I think. And maybe not everybody thinks this way, and that's totally fine, but I see all these systems of thought. And I see Christianity as this closed circle, right? And inside it exists all the answers you need for Christianity. But when a question comes from the outside and it can't find an answer here, it's got to go somewhere else, right? And the Christians, they want to say, hey, all the answers are in the Bible, they're all there. I don't think that's true. But then I have a bit of a different understanding of the Bible than a lot of Christians, and I'm fine with that, and I'm okay with that. And I'm not trying to change anybody's mind. I'm not trying to challenge anybody. I'm just saying this is where I am, and this is what I feel, and this is where I'm at. And if anybody wants to have a conversation with me, I'm more than willing to have conversations about any of this with anybody. But it needs to be a dialogue. I'll tell you where I'm coming from, and I might push you a little bit and challenge you a little bit. That just means I want you to know where you're coming from, okay? I'm not trying to change your mind. I'm not trying to convert you or anything like that. I just want you to be comfortable and eloquent in where you're coming from, okay? So, that's kind of this introduction here. I want you to understand that I think in these systems of thought. And I think these systems of thought influence us from a very young age. And and I'm going to get more into this in the next couple of videos, so I don't want to go too much now into specifics because I'll get into those. But as we look at these systems of thought that have influenced us, and as we start to ask questions about them and ask questions about what we feel about them and if we think they are valid or not, then that's really where the challenge begins. And that's really where the journey begins. And sometimes we have to scrap the whole system and then slowly pick out a few pieces. It's like an assemblage. It's like you've got this big Lego set and you've destroyed it, but you need some of the pieces to build a new little Lego contraption over here that you're working with. Or it's like, you want to create a new painting, but you kind of have to wipe off some of the old painting and get rid of it. But you're still going to use some of the same colors, some of the same lines, composition, but ultimately it's going to be a different painting. And that's fine. And people who are I think what happens a lot is people who are stuck in this system of thought and they can't see beyond it, they get really agitated when somebody kind of moves through it and then keeps going. And they're like, wait a minute, how can you do that? That's not right. That's not allowed. You shouldn't do that. It's like you found the answers, you should be comfortable with the answers. It's like, well, but I didn't find the answers. There's still more questions I have, and I still need to explore them. And I still need to go out and search them out, But you pick up things along that journey that become meaningful for you. Like for me, the Bible is meaningful. I will probably always read the Bible, and I will probably always study the Bible because it's meaningful. But my understanding of it is different than most people's understanding of it. And I think, maybe not. Maybe I'm just some people's understanding that I've been around, and I haven't been around the other people that have my understanding of it. So in the next few videos, I'm going to kind of unpack this whole system of thought process, right? I'm gonna look at some specific examples of seeing the evolution of a thought that kind of comes through and how that challenged me. I'm standing at the end of this process, right? And I have this firm belief that this is true. And then I go and look at where that came from and go, wait a minute. A lot of people along the way believed other things and different things until it got here to me. And so maybe it's time for me to kind of keep pushing that thought along and see where it goes. Maybe this isn't the end all be all of that thought. And spiritually speaking, it's like some things don't change. There is a creation, which we're all part of, and there is a creator, which created it all. That hasn't changed in my thinking. That dynamic exists. Who that creator is and the language we're going to use to talk about that creator and what creation is and how we interact with creation, those things might have changed. And I'm okay with that. And it excites me and it elevates me and it makes me have a greater appreciation for both the creator and creation, right? And that's where we need to go. So if we're involved spiritually or if we're involved physically in a system of thought which is either detrimental to our own psyche or detrimental to our own body, or if it's full of abuse, spiritually, physically, psychological abuse, then we might want to think about leaving that system of thought, or at least leaving those components of that system of thought and moving on to something that is fulfilling and enlightening and uplifting and encouraging and bringing us closer to the divine than something that is just dragging us down full of guilt and shame and just trying to destroy you. Because you're not supposed to be destroyed in this world. You're supposed to be uplifted, and we're supposed to be uplifting others. So that's where I'm at now and where I'm going to continue to go. Okay? And over the next 3 videos, I'm going to explore a little bit more in depth about this whole idea and about how I got to be where I am now and why I am here and where I'm hoping to go. So thank you for joining me. I'll see you later.